Yeah, well, I'm a playwright, and I think every playwright in the world aspires to have some relationship to the Royal Court. I think we all have a relationship with the Royal Court before we even kind of come here or send plays here. It kind of defines our sense of self, I think. I think every play here defines me in some sense. The two in particular, Carol Churchill's Far Away, I think remains the most significant play of this millennium. I think it was astonishingly prescient in its depiction of a culture on the cusp of apocalypse, and linguistically so granite tight. And the image is so startling, beautiful production by Stephen Daldry, designed by Ian McNeill, and Sarah Kane's 448 Psychosis, which I think is a magnificent and beautiful play. And James MacDonald's production of that in the theatre upstairs, or I saw it first in the theatre upstairs, shattered me. And when I think about it now, still kind of leaves the hairs on my arms standing on end. There's a moment at the end of that play when Sarah writes the line, "Please open the curtains," and it was performed in the summer in the theatre upstairs, and they were able to open the shutters that led out to Sloane Square and let the daylight in. And I swear for about a minute nobody in the audience moved or said anything. It was an utterly beautiful piece of theatre. This is a really embarrassing story. I remember being caught on the toilet by Max Stafford Clark because the toilets weren't working properly. That was quite a good memory.
Funnily enough, that's Max's big memory as well.
I think there was something radical in the original ideas that sat underneath the English Stage Company at the Royal Court Theatre in the 50s, in which it was suggested that the function of the theatre should be committing to making work that was challenging in form and content, and that it should lead with the playwright as the principal artist. Up to that point, I don't think any theatre in the world had committed to the playwright as the principal artist. That sounds strange now in an English theatre cultural context, because it's become such a dominant thought, and that just hasn't dated. It hasn't dated. It's just a good idea. You know, sometimes in life, an idea can be so good it can survive a century. It can survive 2 centuries, and I think there's a clarity in that's shattering. And that doesn't mean that you should always be doing plays producing plays that have the same gesture at the heart of them. In fact, it's the opposite. As soon as the gesture becomes familiar, then it stops challenging. It just means you're constantly searching for what's going to be happening next, listening to what the 20-year-olds are saying, listening to what the teenagers are saying, being alert to what's happening culturally, and being in advance of public taste. And that's our job. That's the job. You've just got to hold the nerve and do that. And this can be a building that can define the next century. One of the great joys of working in the Young Writers Programme was I worked with about 700 writers in the course of 5 years. You know, some of them were kind of 13 years old, and you'd go into schools and work with them then. That was really thrilling. Some of them, we did work with older writers, you know, kind of really searching for writers over 50, and that was really great working. Went into workplaces, went into young offenders centres, and that mission, that search, I kind of like fancied myself as like, you know, a kind of football coach on the Hackney Marshes looking for the next generation, and that was really exciting. And on those groups, when somebody came in and you could see that spark of life in their eye, meeting Lucy Prebble for the first time, meeting Mike Bartlett for the first time, meeting DC Moore for the first time, before they'd written their plays for the Royal Court, meeting Jack Thorne for the first time. But you could just tell. They've just got a spirit, and you can recognise it, and that is intoxicating. I did a group for 10 weeks, one of my first groups. There was a girl in the group who didn't say a word for 10 weeks. And at the end of the course, very diffidently, very shyly handed in her play. And she was called Chloe Moss, and the play was A Day in Dull Armour, and we produced it in the Young Writers Festival. And I remember reading it, having known Chloe as being the little girl from Liverpool who never said anything for 10 weeks. And that discrepancy between her shyness and the energy and vitality of her writing, I love that. If the Royal Court didn't exist, I wouldn't want to work in the theatre with quite the same passion as I do.